Are you stuck in the same old routine at work? Do you find yourself hitting a creative wall, unable to see beyond your current perspective? It's time to break free and unlock the power of fresh perspectives. Well, David Guthrow here again with another episode of Discover Fresh Perspectives. And today I have the honor, the pleasure of having a conversation with Jesse Kemp. So, Jesse, I'm just going to ask you just say a little bit about the work that you do, and then we'll dive into what you have a passion about and what you'd like to have a conversation about.
Awesome. Thanks, David. Yeah, I'm Jesse Kemp. I'm a learning and development specialist currently for Western Forest Products, but have been working in leadership development and L&D for the past 20 years. And I want to have a conversation about where L&D was, where it is currently, and where is it going? Because we got a lot of changes coming. So some interesting perspectives around that, Dave.
Well, and let me just start to ask you another question before that. So when you say L&D, learning and development, to who might this apply? Like who uses learning and development? What kind of organizations or structures?
Who doesn't? Learning and development is an integral part. Of course, I'm a little biased with that to every organization in terms of trying to support their employees and learning new skills, moving forward with new platforms and understanding how people can grow. And in a competitive labor market, people want to hold on to talent. Talent sticks around if they're growing and they're getting into a state of flow, they're moving forward and feel like they're progressing in some manner. And if they don't feel like that, they'll jump onto Indeed and start looking where they can learn some new skills and grow. So I think organizations should be investing in their people.
So you said that you'd like to cover the transition where it was to where it is now. And, I have a hunch and a lot of, I don't need to be pejorative about this, but some said, sunset, I speak for a living, sunset industries are ones that have been around for a long time. They continue to follow the same approach to training their employees. So, what was it? What is it now? And why is it so important to take close consideration of some of the changes in L&D? What actually works?
Well, a lot of different changes come around what we're starting to identify about neuropsychology and neurosciences in terms of how people learn. And in the past, it'd often be like, my employees need to know X. We will give them a short video on X. There, we've done our due diligence, or a real heavy focus on compliance training. And compliance training, it is more, we don't want to get sued. We have, for Work BC or whatever organizations looking at safety, have to supply training on X, Y, and Z. And we will do it however we can quickly do it and get it out. But it's not actually about the learning. It's more about protecting the organization from liability. And so shifting away from that and seeing some of these new methodologies can be quite difficult for some organizations. And as more information comes out about what intrinsically motivates opposed to extrinsically motivates individuals, changes how instructional design can be done. So there's a lot of new elements and it's quite dynamic, but a lot of the principles could be really simplified as well. And so understanding those simple things, like people don't pay attention to boring things. And that's one I love to advocate for, is what's boring. Sitting and listening to a video that's quite monotone, and you might even already know the information. There's no pre-assessment done. You can't just challenge the assessment. I have to sit here, even though I already know all this stuff. It can be a really frustrating experience for some employees. And we need to be considering the employee experience when we think about L&D.
So, let's talk about ROI for a minute, because, it's obviously much less expensive to have someone sit and watch a video, and you can tick the box. Yes, we've done that for a compliance training, but that doesn't necessarily equate to a change in behavior that's required. So, but it costs more to do it that way, I would imagine, than having someone sit. So how do you justify the extra cost and the time to do it well?
I love it. That's a fantastic question, because yes, And this is a bit of the shift is that we're starting to see that, and especially in the competitive labor market. It might save you some initial funds right away. I could put together one 30-minute video, supply that. I've done my due diligence, force everybody to go through it. Um, but very little assessment after the fact, but I've done my due diligence. What that's going to cost you is people aren't going to learn. They're going to make mistakes in the workplace, which is going to cost you. People are going to leave. People are going to find better opportunities. And it's a competitive advantage to have strong learning cultures within your organization that understand that L&D should be dynamic, it should be engaging, and it doesn't mean it has to all be instructor led. You can have instructor led in person, and I love that. It could be virtual. You can do it via Teams or Zoom, and that can also be dynamic. No death by PowerPoint. And you can use some engaging activities there. Or if you're going to be using online e-modules, you can incorporate some video, but the big thing is have something generative. Have the participants have to do something, gamify it in some way, so that they have to pay attention, and then we can assess if they were paying attention.
So I don't know if you can answer this question, Jesse, that you currently may not be on the recruiting side of things. In a tight labor market, it's as much the potential employee, the high potential employee interviewing the company as it is the company interviewing the employee. So what I'm wondering, do employees actually ask about how people are trained in the organization? I mean, I would hope they do, but I don't have any way to gauge if that's actually happening or not. Like, is it a differentiator when a person comes to decide between going to company A or company B?
Generally, it's not specifically around L&D from my experience, having sat in on several panels for this organization and previous organizations I've been a part of. Usually the candidates are asking for growth and advancement opportunities, but that's closely linked to L&D. So what opportunities would there be for me to move forward in my career? I want to be progressing. And with that, you're going to have to learn new skills that's associated with leadership or the financial side of leadership or understanding project planning. So looking at moving from an individual contributor into something where you're leading people. And of course, that all requires new skill set.
So, and maybe this has just triggered a thought, something I'll do after this conversation is to go and look at some, well-heeled organizations, ones that have a good reputation. And a lot of them say, we're hiring and, go to this site sort of here. But I wonder how many organizations actually talk about not just their philosophy around L&D, because it's easy to say anything, but what they actually do to deliver on that. Have you ever seen any organizations that does yours do that?
I think we're coming up with something innovative here on the spot. I think that would give any organization a competitive advantage. If in your job descriptions you talk about your L&D framework or mindset and say, listen, we want to make sure that our learning opportunities are dynamic, they're engaging, and you have some semblance of autonomy, and we offer a wide range of skills that you can and training you can upskill yourself with to help you advance in your career or fill in potential knowledge gaps. It doesn't just go to here's our 3-hour onboarding session so you know how to book time off and where to navigate our online applications. It goes, where are your skill sets? What do you want to accomplish? How is it going to contribute not just to our organization, but yourself and your own goals and objectives as well? And I think that'd be a fantastic approach. And I haven't seen it very much.
Okay, well, here's an opportunity for your organization. And coming back to your organization, do you find that there's a difference in terms of what people are looking for based on the generations, like the Gen X, Gen Y, all that kind of stuff? I don't know what all the different names are, but is there a difference there? And I'm going to tie in a second question. It's probably not as much related, but it seems to me with younger people that are highly skilled, move a whole lot more. There's a need to get people up to speed much faster. Like they don't have 3 years to get to know the job because they may be gone after 2. So I guess the two questions, one is, do you notice any differences? I would imagine your organization is quite a range of ages, people that are in the business for a long time and some newer people. But then, well, let's just start with that one.
Oh, well, I like that. And with that, I've been with Western Forest Products for 2 years now. Really enjoyed my time there. And previous, I was with in the healthcare system. Previous to that, I was with the university. And every organization definitely has a very unique culture and approach to L&D. With that, in terms of differences, I say there's more similarities between the generations than there are differences. And yes, people don't stay with the same organization for 50 years like they used to, but that's because technology and advancements in new industries are changing things so rapidly that some jobs move around or get rebranded or changed. And so when I was working for the university, I was actually working with students on career success. So it was one of the classes I was teaching there. And one of the things I would advocate for my students is think of yourself as a company of one. You have a brand, you have a reputation, and that is your company. Your employer is just your client. Now, some people have multiple clients, such as yourself, David. Other people, for me, I just have one client right now, and they require 40 hours of my time every week. But that's my client. So I think of myself as a company of one instead of thinking myself as a Western employee, but I'm servicing my client. I want to make sure I'm doing well by them and keeping my client happy. But having that disposition and viewpoint kind of shifts how you move forward with things. That being said, in terms of the difference in generations, when it comes to learning and development and how they view careers, and I think everybody's very similar. We seek comfort. It's nice to be comfortable and know what you're doing. And once you get into your comfort zone, it's nice to stay there. But after a while, it can lose novelty. We can become a little disengaged because we're just going through the motions. So, additional challenges, as long as they're not too challenging, are fantastic. So, looking for different things like, I don't know, maybe starting a podcast to challenge yourself and look for opportunities to learn and grow is a great way to move forward. So, and that's, if you're 19 and just entering the workforce without going to university, that's the same as you need to get into that right balance of comfort and challenge. And if you're able to do that, it doesn't differ from 19 to all the way to 65 when you may be retiring or never retiring, because you always look for that type of challenge. So I think people are more similar than they are different in that regard.
So I'm going to take another twist here and take the notion of L&D. And I happen to know that you coach lacrosse.
Yeah, it's also a
So
passion of mine.
so are there any of the techniques that you would use in L&D in an organization that might transfer to coaching a sports team? And I think it's a girls team you coach, but I
I
imagine
do.
that some of the challenges and the opportunities for using sort of new L&D approaches could be huge for some of the coaches that might be listening.
Oh, I think they're exactly the same thing. And I think there's a lot of crossover. And a lot of people that are coaches that are listening of youth sports, that's a great little example of what L&D is. You put together a practice plan to help develop certain skills, learn new strategies and everything else. You have a certain time limit and you're trying to move forward with it. So identifying where you want people to grow and so that is L&D. And so there is 100% crossover. And some of the coaches I've seen have a very classical approach to it where they run the same 6 drills every time. And what tends to happen is players get bored. We're doing the same thing all the time. So having that balance of something novel, I love the power of novelty. Novelty is we're doing something new. I'm not sure where we're going. Um, and that creates a certain semblance of engagement and excitement. And I try and do that in L&D if I'm doing a training session where I'm starting something, but you're not sure why we're doing it, where we're going. And it kind of makes people lean in a little bit. And I do the same thing when I'm coaching my lacrosse teams is we're going to go out and they'll come into practice and they'll see a whole bunch of balloons on the floor. And they're going to go, why are there a bunch of balloons on the floor? And then we'll incorporate them and work on skill sets using them. And then the next practice, we have something else out there that a prop of some kind, and we have some fun with that as well. So, yeah, always looking for opportunities to incorporate some novel aspects, change things up, but also have some familiarity and structure in the same time. That balance is key.
Very cool. So I'm going to dive a little bit deeper in, when you talk about novel concepts, novel approaches, and things like that. Maybe you could describe some of those, because I have an idea what novel means, but it may mean different things to different people. So what's it look like when you're doing something in an organizational context that you would describe as novel, meaningful, relevant, and actually helps people develop?
Well, you've touched on a lot of different concepts just in your summary there, because that relevance piece is also really important. And I think everybody's had an experience where we do some icebreakers, and the whole concept is we get to know each other. But really, the icebreakers don't tie in to whatever it is that we're learning about that day. So we do two truths and a lie. We all get to know each other a little bit. And the idea there is to create and foster a little bit more psychological safety. My goal when I'm putting together training is to try and blend that. So have some semblance of novelty, relationship building, but have it tie into um, the learning outcome for that day. And I'll share an activity I recently did. I was actually recently speaking at a conference in Toronto, and I introduced and started my panel session with pole dancing. So I went to the group and said, well, we're going to be discussing how to increase employee engagement. And I think one of the best ways to increase employee engagement, of course, is pole dancing. Right there's novelty. Is what is he talking about? Okay, where is he going? I'm curious. I'm intrigued. How does pole dancing relate whatsoever to employee engagement? And so using a little humor. Now, pole dancing is an activity where I'm actually polling the audience. So it's POLL, not POLE. And the way the activity works is I'm going to make a statement. And if it's true for you, you have to stand up and dance. And so it involves everybody. I love activities that involve everybody there. So you can run this activity with 5 people or 500 people. And so the first one, and to create a little bit of psychological safety in the group, the first thing I do is say, the first statement I'm going to make is true for everybody in this room. And so everybody's going to have to stand up and dance. And then I do a little demo and say, well, if you're a little more introverted, you could just do a brief head nod. And then I say, if you're a little more extroverted, like David Guthrow, you can, and then I'll try and demonstrate some break dancing or something. So yeah, and then the first statement will say, stand up and dance if you are in whatever city we're in at that particular time, and everybody will stand up and dance. But the next question will be, stand up and dance if you think all of your employees are fully engaged. And nobody will stand up and dance. Okay, now we're tying in. Look at the room. So the employee engagement's an issue everywhere. Stand up and dance if you have some strategies that you've incorporated that has increased employee engagement. Now you can look around the room, some people standing up. I would recommend when we have a break, going and asking these individuals about their strategies. Okay, so now I'm saying there is some autonomy. People already have some strategies. Stand up and dance if you'd like to learn from this panel about some new strategies that you can incorporate. Hopefully everybody stands up and dance, and that's how we wrap it up. Great way to introduce it. Everybody has a little chuckle. It's kinesthetic, get people moving, and that's quite engaging. So that'd be an example of some novelty, how it can incorporate and still be relevant to the topic at hand.
So two things occurred to me. One's a quest, and the other is knowing your audience. Because I used to do a fair bit of work with some folks at a diamond mine in the Northwest Territories, and I could just see on one of these retreats at a couple of 100 miles north of Yellowknife, and getting these guys to dance. I was just kind of calculating in my head how long would it be before they threw me in the lake. But part of it is making acceptable, because you could always change it, dance to move or something like that. So I'm also curious. You mentioned psychological safety, which I think is really important. And how do you balance the need for psychological safety, but at the same time, comfort, in my experience, doesn't generate growth. So how do you balance the need for psychological safety and enough discomfort that people are willing to go beyond it to learn? Like, how much of a balancing act is that?
It is a bit of a balancing act, but what psychological safety does, if it's been created within a group, allows for people to take those risks. So psychological safety, based on Amy Edmondson's work, is really saying you are free to take interpersonal risks. An interpersonal risk means failure of some kind, trying something that you haven't done before, demonstrating that, I have the capacity to learn, and I'm going to make some mistakes along the way. That is a culture of learning. What tends to happen, and I put some thought into why, and maybe you and I can discuss it even a little bit further, why we, as we age, become a little bit less willing to take risks. I mean, kids take risks all the time. One of my favorite stories was a little girl drawing a picture, and the teacher asking her, "Oh, what are you drawing a picture of?" And she says, "God." And he said, "Well, nobody knows what God looks like." And she looks at the teacher and says, "Well, they will in a minute." So, but she's just taking a risk. I'm going to try something. I don't know if it's right or wrong. And as we're kids, we're constantly learning and growing, and we're expected to. But at some point, we start to realize showing these gaps in knowledge or skills is a potential vulnerable task, because now I'm showing people I am not as potentially competent as people might think that I am. And in a competitive environment, I don't want to be vulnerable. But what research is showing is that vulnerability can actually create performance increases. Because if I'm vulnerable, at least I'm being authentic and saying, I'm not very good at Excel, or I'm not the best at public speaking, whatever the skill set is. Okay, well, now at least I put it on the table and people can support me in improving that. But where the culture really comes from is, I think, leadership. And one of the things when I'm coaching leaders and supporting leaders is I really try and advocate for them to demonstrate some vulnerability and ask for help from some of their team members.
I think as you get older, like I actually think it's more on a bell curve, right? Because that, and as you climb the curve, there's, more ego, more investment, more consequence to think of. And at some point, I'm sure if this happens in organizations, but it certainly happens for me and some of the other folks I've spoken to, as they get older, they're more willing to try stuff. Right. And just because, like doing this podcast, if people don't like it, okay, I don't care.
I'll like it, David.
And it's going to be fun. And, people that take up new sports and all kinds of different things, when they're not stuck in, like, the two diseases that I think are crippling are comparitis and choiceitis. And compare, where you're comparing yourself to someone else in an organization or in other organizations. And there's so much focus on that. And that can be incredibly toxic and paralyzing. And the other is choiceitis, where I have too many choices. In fact, and there's all kind of research to support this. So giving people more choices, sometimes ends up paralyzing them. So, but I think as either, and one gets age, and doesn't necessarily have to mean chronological age, but, maturity age, where it's, you know what, I don't really care what people think anymore. I notice it, but I don't really care. And once you have that, I think you have the freedom to experiment. But of course, in an organization, you still want to be performing to expectations. So I'm just kind of rambling here, but I'm just, thinking about those things and how mental or maturity age can influence how open we are to trying new things.
Well, what's the common? So I like that. And I would agree with you, because what happens is around, at that maturity age, like you said, not chronological age, at that maturity age, as people stop worrying so much about what others think of them, you'll see people start taking salsa dancing lessons or trying to pick up something new, or maybe even an instrument. Because you're starting to realize, if I constantly concern myself with how I'm looking to others, I just wrap myself in bubble wrap and not do anything. And then what kind of life is that? But there seems to be something that occurs, like you said, in this bell curve. What's occurring for everybody when they're at this peak of, I don't want to try or take risks? And that's something to really kind of consider. And even for myself, so I've always dabbled with the idea of branching out and following somewhat in your footsteps of being independent, but that's a risk. That's scary. Where the constant paycheck and the frequency, and there's families, and all of a sudden the stakes are more than just me. And maybe that contributes a little bit where I don't
Yep.
want to be overly vulnerable or put myself in precarious situations because I have others relying on me. And maybe that translates a little bit to leaders as well. As if I show myself as being too vulnerable, maybe they'll view me as incompetent
Right.
or I shouldn't be here. So I don't know how much to be vulnerable or where to be vulnerable. And it's interesting having worked with leaders. I don't know your experience, but every single one with I've ever worked with throughout my entire career has eventually said, I don't belong here and have
Right.
that imposter syndrome where my team would be better served if somebody else was here. Every single one, even the highest and most competent people where have had this time where I'm not the one that should be here right now. And so as soon as you start to express it, then you're kind of feel like I'm going to be caught. They're going to say, hey, you're right. You shouldn't be here. And then they might validate where my imposter syndrome's kicking in. And then when you start to lose that and you don't have as many people relying on you, the bell curve goes down. Is it maturity level or I have less responsibility, so I'm more willing to take risk? Something to
Mm.
consider, anyways.
Yeah, for sure. So, Jesse, I'm going to ask you one more question, and that's, these conversations, hopefully will leave people that are listening with what's one or two things that I, maybe want to contemplate a little bit more as I go through my work, my life, my family, whatever. If you had two or three things that you could leave for people to consider,
Mm.
what might those be? I don't apologize for putting you on the spot because I know you love it's a growth opportunity for you.
Way to make me vulnerable. Gee. Well, I mean, it depends. And this is one of the challenges with the podcast. It's fun because I don't know who's listening and what they would benefit from. But I'm going to tell you, everybody that's listening interacts with people. And one of the things that's really benefited me throughout my career is understanding humans identify patterns. We are pattern recognizers. And it's easy to follow into certain patterns, but breaking those patterns ties into that novelty. So if you ever have to lead a meeting, if you're ever doing a presentation, think what is the most common pattern? I stand up and I introduce myself, and then I go over the learning objectives, and then I kick off with an icebreaker. I would challenge everyone to say, how can we break this? How can we create a different pattern so it has a semblance of novelty? And it might be just a different introductory activity. It could be something as simple as I'm not going to use PowerPoint today. I'm going to do something just a little bit different, and that'll draw people in and be more engaged with whatever it is you're sharing. The other thing that I would really recommend, especially those leaders that are listening, to learn more about is intrinsic motivators, self determination theory. It is something that has really transformed my approach to leadership. I find a lot of people working in the HR realm focus on extrinsic motivators. So progressive discipline, if you're late and we're doing these and we'll hit you with the stick. But if you're doing really great, we'll increase your compensation, we'll give you a bonus and give you all these extrinsically motivating things. And this is how we're going to get you to move forward. Those work, they do. There's no doubt about it. But I don't think they're as powerful as understanding how to get people motivated intrinsically. And with that, just a brief summary of self-determination theory. Everybody has the Google machine, so I have a Google and read about it. But mastery, it falls into three buckets. Mastery, belonging, which ties into that um, psychological safety we were discussing, and autonomy, letting people have some choice. And that's where I'd like to go, even with compliance training. And this is something I advocate for within organizations is give me, I still have to do this for liability reasons. I understand that, but at least give me the opportunity to immediately challenge the assessment. So I could show that I have the knowledge because that's why I'm here. So don't make me sit through an hour of videos just because. Let me immediately challenge it. And if I fail that, now I have to go through the hour. Okay, fair enough. But at least you've given me the opportunity. I've had some autonomy and some semblance of choice.
So I'm just going to abuse the process I was going to use and just close off on this and just say one other thing about intrinsic motivation. In most organizations, the extrinsic motivations are the same for everybody. the same intrinsic motivation does not work for everybody. So does that mean that the supervisor, leader, manager has to think more about it? Absolutely. So you have to believe that there's a payoff in doing that and treat each person as an individual, get to know them and understand what will motivate them. Is that fair?
Yeah, that is fair, although there is the self-determination theory is all about intrinsic motivations, and regardless, there will be differences, but the three buckets, people will always be intrinsically motivated by some choice. It's empowering. Even if you're trying to get your kids to eat vegetables, if you say, tonight we're having carrots, they have no choice. They might fight back. If you include them in the process and say, hey, tonight we can have carrots, broccoli, or peas. What do you choose? I choose broccoli. Okay, the chances of them eating their vegetables increases because they've had some choice. So it can be great for supporting behaviors that you want to move forward with. Understanding belonging connection, if we're working together towards a common goal, and sports teams are great for this. We're all trying to win the championship. If we're in it together, we try and help those weaker players develop the skills so that they improve and lean onto our stronger players, and everybody knows the role that they play in order to contribute to an overall championship. Not everybody can be your star scorer. You need fourth line grinders if we're doing a hockey analogy, and you'll need your left guard in football. Not everybody's the star quarterback. Everybody has a role to play. So helping people understand where they belong and how they contribute, huge. That's motivating. I know my role and how it helps. And then mastery, which ties into the L&D, is I want to feel like I'm improving. I'm getting better somehow. And organizations can help people do that.
So, Jesse, I was hoping just to have a conversation, and this turned out to be a course. So, for those that are interested, I have a hunch they may want to listen to it a couple of times to think about just what exactly that means to them. So, Jesse, I'd like to thank you very much for participating in this conversation. I'm David Guthrow. I've had the pleasure of chatting with Jesse Kemp here. And listen again. And this has been Discover Fresh Perspectives.
Thanks, David.
Subscribe now, because on Fresh Perspectives, every episode is an opportunity to explore new horizons and redefine what's achievable.